This was an, we were basically resupplying this fire base as well as I was getting dropped off to go out and rig a shot down Huey helicopter that we wanted to get back to the base. And you can see they were just throwing the stuff out because it's a perimeter set up, but you never know. A 50 caliber can go many, many miles. Plus they also had recoilless rifles out there.
You don't know if the NVA or the VC will hit you, and
Right.
so you want to get the
Get
stuff
out.
off the helo and get out.
And you know,
Yeah.
the CH-47 was a prize target. It was, if they shot a CH-47 down, they thought, boy, they've got something. So they were always trying to get us.
So you're getting things off quickly, and somewhere close to this Chinook is the Huey that was shot
Yeah,
down.
the Huey's off to, it's behind it, probably another 100 yards or so. I got a pre-induction physical notice in high school, and I was a little concerned about that. My father said, don't worry about that. We'll deal with that if you get drafted. So after I graduated, I got my induction notice, and I'm going, geez, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go to college. I was scared. You know, there was a war going on. People were dying. My family had lost members in previous wars. And so I thought I wanted to go to college, and my grades weren't stellar in high school. It was more of I wanted to party, and I liked cars and girls. So as I look back on it, my grades were lacking, I believe. And so there was a local community college, and I was going to go there as a temporary student, get my grades up, and then transfer to University of Maryland or another school. But to be honest with you, I don't think, looking back on it, going to a community college would have helped. I think I would have had the same attitude. So from that perspective, in that regard, the Army helped me a lot. But after I got my induction notice, my father and I had several conversations between the time I received the notice to the time I left. And he made the comment that loving one's country is like loving a beautiful, wonderful woman like your mother. And he was saying to me that I love your mother dearly, but there are times she will do something that I really don't like. And he said, I love our country a lot, but I don't like how the country's drafted you because there's so many others who could have been drafted. And that really spoke volumes about what my father and mother were going to go through, or what they were going through, the turmoil, internal turmoil, and the angst that they had, and concern about I was the baby of the family, the last one.
And the only one drafted in the military?
No, my brother was on a naval air on a USS Forrestal. He was, on that.
Wow.
My brother was in Korea, but he was, that's a whole story unto itself. He wanted to be a warrior like our Uncle James from World War II, who did make it home. And so my father was in the military, but I was actually going off to a war. At that time in our nation's history, parents, they didn't know. They were going through a lot of concern, a lot of upset and angst because they didn't know what was going to happen to their loved ones going into the Army and going off to war.
Yeah.
And there was going to be probably many sleepless nights had we gone to Vietnam. And my parents did spend many sleepless nights while I was there.
So when your dad was telling you that, being a citizen of the country, it's a kind of a relationship, and going with his analogy, it's like a marriage, and you're in the relationship, but sometimes there are rough days. And so he's saying, so this is one of the rough days for you. You've just gotten your induction notice. But it sounds like he was also processing this for himself. He was thinking of his own way to think about it, as they were another son in the military, but in this case, actually almost certain to go to Vietnam.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
And I think that's the conversations, some of the conversations he and my mother were having. And I think that showed me what was in their hearts and minds at the time, my parents, for my parents.
And did this conversation you had with your dad, sort of the way he framed the situation for you, did that come back to you during your year in Vietnam as times got rough and there are tough days? I mean, did what your
Oh.
dad say to you mean something to you through
Yeah,
that
there were
time?
days when I prayed that I could make it through the day or through the mission. We were going into a resupply, and again, it was in one of those combat operations. And if you look at there's an M60 machine gun I'm firing, and the gun mount that comes down from the center of the weapon.
Uh-huh.
You can see where a bullet actually hit that,
You can see it.
hit
yeah.
this young man's hand. His right, he was flying right left gun that day. You can see he's got something holding his hand because he was bleeding pretty profusely. So I grabbed a can of ammunition and just linked it together and started belt feeding the machine gun
Wow.
to try to suppress the fire so we could get in to the LZ. It was a very hot LZ, and most of the fire was coming from the left side.
So you're very close to ground level here.
Yeah, we were coming in, and they were just looking, and most of the rounds came in at that level and below to the floor level. So the main systems, it was basically in the body of the aircraft. We didn't go to the front, and I don't know why. I guess they thought most of the things that they were shooting at the center. But we were very fortunate. No one in the front, was hit. Neither the pilots nor the back after the aircraft with all the systems. We had
Right,
systems in the front
okay.
and the back. We were very fortunate. We came away with lots of holes in the aircraft that day, but
Wow.
nothing major except
Yeah.
for.
So you said hot LZ, so that means you're coming you're coming into a situation where the enemy's trying to
They're
take you
shooting,
down.
right.
Were you dropping off supplies or picking
Yes.
up wounded,
We're
or
dropping
both?
off supplies and picking up wounded.
And both, okay. And wounded, yeah.
It was very critical to get the wounded out as fast as possible within a critical. They call it now the critical
Sure.
hour. But even back then,
Yeah.
it was trying to get them out as quickly as
Now,
possible.
was there a medic on board as well?
No, they just
No.
said we were bringing in supplies, and they said, "Can you take back?" And we said, "Sure."
Okay.
Yeah,
I see.
so. But the Chinook could carry, was it 32 liters?
Mm.
You could set it up for a big medevac.
And then, what's the story behind this photo?
This was up in the mountains, and I think that was the 198th Light Infantry Brigade was out there, and they were engaged in a battle with the North Vietnamese. And I took this photograph because you could see the ceiling coming down, and that's the hill on the right where General Ramsey, several months later, he was going out to be with the troops trying to make it up through that. His pilot was trying to fly up through that break, that valley,
Mm-hmm.
and he was off course based upon, I guess, where he thought he was, and the radar, and they actually went into the side of the mountain onto the right. When they realized that they were coming into, they saw the trees, he actually pulled a lot of cyclic, which meant the front of the aircraft went up, the tail went down, actually hit the trees with the tail rotor, and it just
Oh.
caused it to go down. What happened when it went through the trees, it rolled down the hill. And General Ramsey there was two people killed in that crash.
Right.
He was a Spec 4, he was a crew chief, and either a lieutenant colonel or a full colonel who had just been reassigned to the division,
Mm.
who was a class West Point 53 or 54,
Mm-hmm.
and he died in that crash. But
And then the General Ramsey, he was a two-star general
yes,
on this helo, and he was heading out to just be with the troops, spend time with the troops. and-
see how they were doing, how the battle was going, and he was always doing that, and I think that's what caused this accident.
yeah,
this crash.
'cause they wanted to go out.
And he was basically he was pretty well wounded, not by bullets or anything, but during the crash he almost lost his arm. His left arm was mangled, they said.
Wow.
He had several broken ribs and an ankle, and he was out for almost 2 days. He was bleeding. They finally stopped the bleeding. They flew in a doctor from the hospital, Medevac hospital. He was there 4 hours to get him stabilized, and the other crew.
The doctor was, so they inserted the doctor. The doctor worked with the 3 crew members, the 3 surviving crew members, one of them being General Ramsey. And the doctor was there 4 hours before they were able to
Right.
get them out.
Basically
Yeah.
doing a triage to get them stabilized, so when
Right.
they got them back to the Chulai in the hospital, they could, they'd be better
Right.
off. So
And altogether, the general and the other 2 survivors were out there for about 24 hours.
24
is that
hours.
right? Before
24
they were
hours.
taken back.
That's an aircraft. I think I shared a picture with you that was on fire. It was shot
Mhm.
down. It was on fire and ran away and ran back. I took a picture of it because again, one of those people won't believe this, but
Right.
that one was shot down. The back end of it is burned off, and that's
Wow.
what's left of it after the Vietnamese, after a big fight. They were trying to get us, and we had a small, I want to say, artillery, not artillery, a little tank unit come in. They had APCs, and they set up a perimeter and until we could get out. But the Vietnamese just destroyed this aircraft. So that's what they wanted to do.
Did they get inside of it and
They
ripped it to
They
pieces?
threw. That's a result of grenades, I guess. And
Yeah. Well, so why would the military expend resources extracting
Bringing those-
that? Can it still
Well-
kind of be recycled?
No, that right there. When it first went down, why we were trying to get it out
Oh, okay.
was it still had avionics, it had radio equipment, it had transmissions,
see.
it had blades, things that were still serviceable that could be used on other aircraft.
Sure.
Because at that point in time, again, that's how I met Ken Science. Aircraft, we were flying so much, and we weren't getting parts enough, quickly enough
I
from the
see,
States.
yeah.
So anytime we were able to retrieve an aircraft that was not completely destroyed like this,
Okay.
that had avionics or systems and components that we could reuse.
Right,
Another,
right.
we would do that. So we were trying to save it, and they made sure we couldn't save
Now,
it.
did you extract it anyway, or at this point did you just leave it?
I think we went back about a week later just to get it out of there.
Okay.
After that,
Yeah.
it was the Vietnamese were gone, and
Yeah. Yeah.
we were doing support for the 5th Special Forces in Nha Trang. We were helping there was an Air Force base, and we would go out and just pick up down aircraft, shot down helicopters. We'd take these big guard, I love the fact that we would take these big guard towers, they build these big guard towers, and we'd take them out to these Special Forces camps,
Mhm.
set them up. Sometimes we'd fly out beforehand and make sure everything's right, and then come back and set them up. And we were doing that, and I met him, we struck up a conversation. And then he went off and was able to get parts and supplies. And he came back, we had some more conversation about my experience, my education, and how many hours I was flying, what did I do, did I want to fly more? And I said, yeah. And so all the skills that I possessed at that point in time, going through the full thing, being a flight engineer, fully trained in that. My rigging experience, he heard about some of the rigging about a jet or two I picked up. And he said, that's really what we're looking for in our flight platoon up in July. And so 2 weeks later, I'm in his company. I arrived in his company, and in 2 weeks, and about 3 hours later, I'm on an aircraft flying a mission. The other person that I would say was a very, very good teacher, mentor, was Lee Dorsey, another E7. He met me at the airfield, picked me up on a Jeep, brought me into the company area, got me signed in, showed me a bunk, and took me back out to the flight line. And he was a flight platoon sergeant, but he had already been through a tour of Vietnam previously. And a Chinook is a very complex, intricate flying machine. And it just really is. It's 2 engines. It's got multiple hydraulic and electrical systems. It has flight systems. And so we had these big volumes several volumes of books, and there were times when there was a mission coming up, I had to do a repair or something, and I'm going through it, and I'd run over and find Lee Dorsey, and I'd say, Lee, what is, he would give me the answer, or if he didn't have the answer readily available, he would ask a couple questions, and he'd say, well, look in volume 7, and these things were like this thick, and about da-da-da-da. And so he always helped me in those regards. But the thing that I will always remember Lee Dorsey for was that how to maintain a good personal hygiene and being clean.
Which is not easy to do in Vietnam.
Yeah, it wasn't easy to do because,
yeah.
At 178th, they had a water trailer, a little, and you'd take these buckets, and that's how you'd take a huge bunch of guys who were standing around, like be 6 or 8 of us all standing there in the nude with these little bowls and throwing water on ourselves, soaping up. And anyway, he showed me a lot of things about being clean. And if you couldn't, I remember the thing that always impressed me was he showed me how to take one pair of socks and wear them for 4 days. And how to do a canteen bath. He would come out, be out there resupplying a fire base or a group of where the soldiers were, and all of a sudden this Huey helicopter would fly in. It would be General Ramsey, and he would greet the officers and talk with them. And next thing you know, he's over talking with the enlisted personnel. And he would go around and he would actually talk and he'd shake everyone's hand. It was almost like a politician, but I think it was sincere because he always wanted to know how the troops were doing, how they felt, their attitude, the morale. It was important to him. One would have to appreciate, here's a 2-star general in charge of the largest division in Vietnam. Largest division, had so much going on. And if you appreciate all the things and the responsibility that went with that, and he still found time to be out there wanting to do this. And it just...
He would have had a good excuse not to do that.
Yeah, he could have, he said, I've got all this other, but he always found time to do it. North Vietnamese they were pounding Khe Sanh, and they basically had control of that whole northern part of the I Corps and up around the DMZ. So they wanted to come down through Laos and through North Vietnam that way and take over the whole 2/3 of I Corps. They wanted to own I Corps. So that meant that the Americal Division's area of operation was under constant attack. And it was a really difficult time. It was a very tenacious, well-equipped North Vietnamese units. They were ready. They were just pounding everything. They were, fire bases. They were engaging in superior forces with our smaller forces. We actually had the 101st even came up to support the Americal Division. And so we were flying all the time. And we were out there sometimes, some aircraft would get shot down, had to go out and pick it up. And that's where you're under. They knew one helicopter, they use it as a decoy to get another one coming because they know it's not destroyed. So rather than destroy it, they'd wait for somebody to come out and try to get it.
So if they shoot a helo down, they know that before long a Chinook's going to come in to take it out, which then gives them another opportunity.
Or a flying crane, but the cranes sometimes, there was only a handful of those. They were not. It was easier to have another Chinook to come in. And so there was a lot of that. A lot of Hueys were down, lots of Hueys. We lost, during that period, there wasn't an aircraft in our unit that didn't receive enemy fire.
Wow.
And
during this period you're talking about here?
Yeah, for Lamar plane. It was just...
69.
And so that meant that flight crews we were flying, the aircraft were flying, or trying to keep it going all the time. And it was kind of in a period that I thought, but it's great. I was able to fly a lot. I was able to do a lot. When I wasn't flying, I was back in the company area just catching mail and reading up things. And then I'd go down the flight line at night, work on the aircraft.
Mm.
And the company commander, because I couldn't sleep, I'd be down there working with helping the maintenance crews do maintenance and repairs. And sometimes you turn around and there's Ken Sines walking along the flight line.
Mm.
Apparently he couldn't sleep either, and he would be out there talking with people and giving them wrenches and things. So it was those kinds of
Wow.
things, and it just just trying to keep people motivated to keep going.
Yeah.
And so I flew a lot. There were people who couldn't fly for whatever reason, so I would take their time, their slots, and fly. This guy, Larry Self, I was telling you about, he was a captain. He and I logged a lot of time together, because if an air crew couldn't make it, he would ask if I would go flying with he and my crew chief, and I had a gun crew, and we'd go out and do that. So.
Mm.
That's pretty much, it was because of some of those times that some of the things I did during that time period.
So was there a particular thing that led to the Bronze Star, or was it just because of your just continually volunteering to go out on missions and things?
There were some of them, but it was written up about my I guess the willingness to continue to go for days without sleeping and continue to fly. I'd go out on an LZ, and they'd drop me off. I'd rig up a helicopter so we could come back the next morning and pick it up. They'd land here, pick me up, and we'd come over, pick the aircraft up, and go out.
Yeah.
So.
Now, why did you keep volunteering for missions?
Well, because as Ken Sines, I believe in my heart that Ken Sines felt that his unit was supporting all those people in the field with needed and critical supplies, and either bringing wounded out or taking things back into them. And
food and water,
ammunition,
stuff,
moving artillery pieces in and out to get better placement, those kinds of things.
Mm.
And that there was a few of us who saw that, and there's others in my unit that basically did the same thing. So we would go out, we would fly during the day, and start all day, fly all day, come back, grab something to eat, jump in the Jeep, go down the flight line, and stay
So
there.
what motivated you to keep volunteering? Wasn't that you were, I don't think, you were thinking of, I'm going to do 20 or 30 years in the military, so this is a way to make my record look really great. It's primarily the guys out in the field really need this stuff.
They
and
did.
They need us to be in action.
They did. They needed us. They needed our supplies. They needed what we were doing in support of them. But I really enjoyed what I did.
In addition to the enemy, they've got the leeches, they've got the mosquitoes, they've got just the relentlessness of being in the countryside. That's part of it as well.
Yeah, you think about it. If one puts it in perspective, they are there at night. I'm there at night working on aircraft lights. They didn't. They're out there sleeping with the critters in the grass, snakes and things like that. Yeah, we had those, but it wasn't like that.
Sure.
So it's, we need to think, as my parents would say, we need to think about our fellow humans and how we help each other. Times that I would go out prior to rigging up a helicopter or a bulldozer. You go out and you'd have to spend time out there, and you wouldn't want a helicopter sitting there waiting, because if it was a prime target. So sometimes I'd go out, I'd be out there all night. I'd spend the night, and if weather wasn't permitting, I think the longest time I was out on a field was 3 nights, and that gave me the perspective about what these guys were going through. I'd sit there in their bunkers with them sometimes, and just while they're guard duty, and talk with them. So you strike up conversations with people. So I wasn't there. I mean, it was it was on occasion that I would do that, but it was enough to give me the insight about what these guys are going through.
Yeah, what a tough job that was.
Now,
to be out in the field.
then transpose, put transition to oneself into their position. How would I feel? I would want somebody doing what I'm doing. So why
Sure.
wouldn't I want to do that? And I wanted to make sure I was helping others, to make it through the day.
Just tell us real quick about this machine. I know it was one of the workhorses of the war, but what are some of the primary missions it would be involved in?
Well, artillery, resupply,
Bringing in artillery,
Bringing
artillery to
artillery.
people. Yeah.
taking artillery out.
Yeah.
There was one time that we actually was out on an LZ, it was called LZ Siberia, near the Laotian border, actually took out a bulldozer.
Wow.
And so they could try to set up and flatten some, straighten out this, create a nice LZ in a camp. And we went back out there because it was being overrun by North Vietnamese. They were trying to extract all of that. And that's another story for another time. But
So picking things up and
Moving.
moving things out to
Doing-
guys at landing zones, etc.
big medevacs, we had lots of,
Yeah.
if a base was hit, a fire base was hit, we'd go in and pull the individuals out,
Right.
wash the aircraft out because it was bloody and
Right. Yeah.
let's see, they also provided, resupply pretty much.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Also-
drop off troops as well.
And then we
Sure.
would do, when they wanted a big combat assault, there would be 3 or 4 Chinooks and you'd have companies of guys in there and they'd fly them out and land, and that's how you get a whole company of
Yeah.
soldiers out at a time.
Wow. And is this Chulai or where is this?
This is Chulai.
Chulai. And then let's go to this photo. What's the story behind this photo?
This is it's a chemical drop. It's gas drop or it's one of the agents, the defoliants that we would use out of that. The key for some of these, the reason they would use the Chinook helicopter is that with a fixed wing aircraft or this UAs, the way they were set up with spray, they'd have these big sprayers on it. With the 55-gallon drums, they determined that we could roll those out the back of a Chinook and get right over top of an entrance or an exit of a cave system or
Which
a
the
tunnel
enemy would
system.
use to hide in
Yes.
and have hospitals.
And so you could use the defoliant to get around that and would still provide cover for the Americans when you're coming in to assault that area. But so the openings would be defoliated and the rest of the area where the American troops would be in would still be green.
Mm.
So we would do that on a regular basis, and this is a chemical team in the back. What they would do is each one of those containers had a stick of dynamite in it you see the little tag on it.
Yeah.
They would roll the can over on its side, roll it off, pull the pin, and sometimes do airdrops, and sometimes the cans would hit the ground and burst. So
Wow.
it was pretty effective.
Yeah.
But sometimes the intel that we had, we thought we'd have an entrance and an exit, and there were other entrances, exits, because they would come out sometimes and shoot at us.
Oh, these elaborate
Yeah.
tunnel systems.
Yes.
So this is possibly or probably Agent Orange, some of it here?
Probably. I don't see usually we had stripes on
Orange
the container.
stripes, right? is
Well, they had
I think.
white and different color stripes.
I see.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, it's the primary purpose of this is to defoliate, that is to knock out the greenery, and so the enemy can't hide as well.
Yeah, the foliage, or if it's gas, trying to drop the gas into the openings or near the openings, so it goes into the tunnel structure to get the Vietnamese out.
Right. So sort of like the way police might use gas to get
Yes.
people to come out of a house or something.
And it was,
Wow.
I think it was effective. It helped.
Yeah.
But
How this helo is it's airborne. How high up were you?
2,000 to 4,000 feet.
Really? And sometimes this kind of operation is taking place while the helo's under fire, taking fire.
Yeah, well, we wouldn't come into a hot area, but once
Right.
we were there, they'd start shooting at us. And,
Right,
and
yeah.
if they start making hits, we'd probably want to get out because a lot of we didn't have masks or any kind of protective gear.
Oh, right.
And so it was very risky because if it was CS gas or something like that, it would affect everybody in the aircraft.
Sure.
It could have crashed. So
Wow.
we took a hit, and
Yeah.
one of those cans started leaking. We get out right away and try to find the can and get rid of it quickly as
Just knock
possible.
it out. Good grief. You did have, if I remember right, at least 3 close calls, if I remember correctly, where you had a bullet that hit a steel plate that was right
Yeah.
on your chest. If I remember correctly, there was another incident where a bullet came up and hit the bottom of a helo and sort of knocked you up.
And then I had cigarettes shot out of my pocket. But yeah,
cigarette shot out of your pocket. Yeah.
you know, I could say, you know, you could say that I knocked on death's door many times, but death never answered. There were times when you'd be out in the field, and on a Sunday, there would be a chaplain come by and would have service, and you see the Vietnamese come out of the field.
Mm.
You know, there's something to this
So a
because
Catholic chaplain, probably.
yes,
then,
and
yeah.
so the Vietnamese would be there having service with us, and go, well, we're here for a
Mm.
reason. So it was more than just. It just helped me continue to develop my faith that we were doing the right thing for these people because they wanted us to be there to help them live under freedom,
Yeah.
so they could live their lives the way they wanted to. They were just eking out an existence.
Mm.
So they wanted more, just like every other, you know, I believe other people would want more. They didn't
Sure.
want to live under communist rule. There was islands off the coast, and they blockaded the coast in this little island, couple islands, and they were fishing villages. So what we did, we arranged to take a couple pallets of, big sling load pallets of sea rations and LORP rations out to this village because they couldn't go out and fish. And they flew out a doctor and just, you know, they gave them medicine and inspected people, and I'm thinking,
Sure.
you don't hear about that. You know,
Right.
you hear about, well, they had this or this. And I think it's the culture of the 60s that's a carryover, but how many people really looked at it from, yeah, there's a lot of bad, but there's also a lot of good.
Sure.
So one could look at it as being bad, but also one could look at it as good.
Yeah, I mean, one of the good things is, you know, I think it can be said that this country, along with our allies, you know, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, Philippines, Thailand, and then, you know, elements of the South Vietnamese army, I think, you know, we really did attempt to give South Vietnam a shot. Of course, there are problems when you think about the government of South Vietnam and
Right.
the extent to which they were willing or able really to run their own country. But it seems to me that you and your fellows over there, you know, at least gave the government of South Vietnam a shot. And I think that's worth just noting that there was that mission, there was that goal.
Right,
You know.
and if one were to acknowledge that yes, the government was not the ideal government, and that percolated down to the military and all. But for the most, if you talked with the individuals, the Arvins, their families, they wanted that opportunity. They wanted the opportunity that we were providing. And think about this. The United States is, from my perspective, the most giving nation on the face of the earth. So
I think the numbers bear that out.
right. So we
Sure.
were there not only giving us in numbers and dollars and cents, but we were also doing it in bodies and blood and our treasure, which I believe was, and I still believe, the treasure of the United States is the young men and women who were in the military. You know, we gave a lot of our treasure up over there. When I came home, you asked me, did I ever experience any bad things about coming home? I absolutely did. The local VFW came out and decorated my parents' home before I got home.
Mm.
And it had all this things out there. And it was a day before, was it that day, the night before I got home, somebody or some bodies came by, and because they were so anti-war and thought it was stupid, and what they did is they threw trash and garbage in my parents' yard.
Mm.
And you know, I'll never forget the hurt I experienced about that. That's when I realized, and I look back on it, now I understand why there's anger issues with guys who return from not only Vietnam, but other wars.
Mm.
And the hurt and the PTSD that these people go through. Then it just probably compounds that because no one came home.
I think so.
You know, no one, when you come home, you throw trash in your parents' yard, and it's, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Why would someone
Yeah,
do that?
Yeah.
You know, I've never talked about that until
Sure.
I thought about that this weekend, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking, why would someone or somebody group do that? Because they hated the war so much? Didn't they think through what that impact would be on me and
Sure.
my parents
Yeah.
and friends of mine who saw that, who were in veterans also? Oh boy, I'm on a mission.
Mm.
I'm on a mission. I don't want to give. I don't want to mess this one up. This is an
Mm.
opportunity. I don't
Mm.
ever want to mess up.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came home, it wasn't long after that. I entered in school and went back. Found a job right away because again, I had to get my mind going. I had to get moving and stay in a positive attitude. I couldn't sit back and reflect. Oh, that was so bad. It was this or that. So I found a job right away, and I started going to school full time. So I worked full time, went to school full time. So I was going to University of Maryland, and that's what kept me going. And I thought, well, I'm not going to mess this up. You know, a lot of people didn't make it home. 58,300, I think.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to blow it. You know, I could have been drinking and drugging and all that, but you know, why have mine be all fogged up? Not that I didn't throw back a few bourbons in my time, but
Sure.
but there was a lot of things I wanted to accomplish in life because of that opportunity. I've been
Do you
given.
feel like you partly were motivated by a sense of obligation to the guys who didn't survive, who didn't make it home?
I think underlying, yeah, that's because what could they have done in lives? What could they have achieved? We don't know. So why would I waste my time and not achieve something when they could have? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Right.
It's really difficult. It's a hard one. You know, you think about it, and you know, if you have faith in God, then there's something to it. My wife Kathy has always asked me why veterans get together for reunions on a yearly basis. I believe that they gather with other veterans as often as possible in hopes of preserving their sanity. They reinforce their brotherhood of battle, war, and life. Because then when they get back together, it's that brotherhood, and you know, they say, well, yeah, this wasn't that bad. You know, you talk things over, and that's why a lot of these people will get together. And I think that's what it is, because people say, why do you get together for on a yearly basis? I think it's for those reasons.
Sure. Yeah.
It's that common bond, that brotherhood, you know, the fellowship and the brotherhood that we experienced in the military.